Chapter 1: The Fateful Flight. The business class cabin of Flight BA-177 from London to New York exuded its signature luxury and tranquility. Soft golden lights reflected off the premium leather seats as passengers settled in. Low murmurs blended with announcements from the flight crew. James Carter lifted the glass of wine from the small table beside him, swirling the deep red liquid before taking a sip. He wasn't particularly fond of drinking while flying, but it was a habit he maintained before every major business deal, a deal that could completely transform his financial empire. James didn't believe in fate. He was the kind of man who trusted numbers, meticulously calculated plans. The proof was Carter Holdings, the financial conglomerate he had built over more than a decade, now operating globally. But to expand into the American market, he needed to close this deal. He skimmed through the latest email from his legal team, fully focused on the merger agreement's terms. Just as he was about to respond to an important inquiry from the U.S. executive team, a piercing cry rang out from the cabin behind him. "Ah! Mommy! I don't like the plane anymore. I want to go home." James frowned, his expression darkening. He had no patience for children. In his entire life, he had never had to deal with one. Despite being nearly 40, he had never started a family, never considered having kids, and certainly never wanted to be entangled in emotional matters like this. The child continued sobbing uncontrollably, drawing glances from several passengers. Some looked irritated, while others merely shrugged in sympathy. But James only felt annoyance. He pressed the call button for a flight attendant, intending to request a seat change, when a female voice spoke right behind him. "I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience, sir." He turned and met the eyes of a flight attendant with an apologetic expression. "What's going on?" His voice wasn't loud, but it carried an unmistakable authority, making the flight attendant instinctively straighten up. "We had a booking system issue," she explained quickly. "A passenger and her son missed their connecting flight and had to be rebooked. Since the economy cabin was full, we had no choice but to seat them here." James's frown deepened. Business class was not the place for a disruptive child. But before he could protest, the flight attendant swiftly bowed and left, revealing a young woman standing there with her son. The mother, her dark brown hair falling in soft waves, held the boy close, murmuring soothing words. Yet the child continued to sob. "Shh, Leo, don't cry anymore. We just need to sit still for a little while. The plane will take off soon, sweetheart." The boy buried his face in his mother's shoulder, but his sniffles persisted. James clenched his jaw, suppressing his irritation. A restless child could ruin a 7-hour flight. He turned back to his laptop, but as his gaze unintentionally landed on the child, he froze. Under the soft lighting of the business class cabin, the boy's tear-filled eyes glistened. But what left James utterly stunned wasn't the tears. It was their color, a cold grayish blue, exactly like his own. The boy's face bore an uncanny resemblance to him. James's throat went dry. His heart thumped heavily. Number impossible. He swallowed hard, an eerie sense of familiarity creeping into his chest. There was no way such a coincidence could exist. He reminded himself that millions of people shared this eye color. But in the depths of the child's gaze, he saw himself. And then, something even stranger happened. The boy suddenly stopped crying. His wide, teary eyes locked onto James, as if he had just made a startling realization of his own. And to James's utter disbelief, the child leaned forward, his tiny hand reaching out with curiosity. "Who are you?" The small, trembling voice echoed through the cabin. For a moment, James forgot how to breathe. His hand instinctively lifted, resting on the boy's head, gently ruffling his hair. Unconsciously, he was soothing the child. And just like that, the crying ceased entirely. A strange silence enveloped them. James immediately withdrew his hand as if burned. What the hell was he doing? He had never done that before. Not with anyone. Welcome to Soul Stories. Life can feel overwhelming, but here we share heartfelt stories to bring you peace, joy, and inspiration. Your support, every comment, like, and follow, means the world to us. It fuels our passion to create more meaningful and uplifting stories just for you. Did our latest story touch your heart? Drop an "I am happy" in the comments if it resonated with you. Join our community of kindness, love, and positivity by subscribing today. Let's make every day a little brighter. Together. Chapter 2. The Woman from the Past. At that moment, James Carter's world froze. The woman standing before him, with dark brown wavy hair and wary eyes, was no stranger. Sophia Miller, the woman he had lost 5 years ago. Impossible. Was this some cruel joke of fate? James had never believed in things like destiny, but this coincidence was too great for him to ignore. And what shocked him even more was the child sitting in her lap, the boy who looked exactly like him. Sophia seemed just as stunned. She clutched her son tightly, as if her maternal instincts were warning her to protect the child from James. But James didn't miss a single expression on her face: surprise, panic, and a hint of guilt. He took a deep breath, his deep, icy voice breaking the tension. "Is he my son?" Sophia froze. No denial, no protest, just deafening silence. James could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his chest. He clenched his fists, trying to control his emotions. He had always been the kind of man who remained calm in any situation, whether handling billion-dollar deals, high-pressure meetings, or navigating the power games of the financial elite. But now, with one unanswered question, he felt as though he was standing on the edge of a cliff. Sophia remained silent. Then she turned away. That silence was her answer. James felt his entire body go numb for a moment. He didn't know how to react. Anger, shock, or pain? For the first time in his life, James truly didn't know what to do. A voice echoed in his mind. "She hid your son from you for 5 years. 5 years. 5 years he had lived without knowing he had a child. 5 years since Sophia had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind a void he had never dared to confront. Now he looked at the boy, Leo, clutching his mother's dress, his wide eyes filled with curiosity. The child knew nothing about him, had never called him Dad. And that was what hurt James the most. He swallowed his fury, keeping his voice as steady as possible. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sophia didn't answer. She avoided his gaze, unconsciously tightening her hold on Leo. That one small gesture told James everything. She was afraid of him. No, she was afraid of losing her son. Tension hung thick between them. James wanted to press for answers, to make Sophia talk. But just then, a flight attendant appeared in the aisle, her voice calm yet professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are preparing for landing. Please fasten your seatbelts." Sophia seized the opportunity. She turned away swiftly, cradling Leo in her arms, avoiding James's gaze. Rage surged through him, but he knew there was nothing he could do right now. He clenched his fists, his eyes never leaving Sophia. As the plane began its descent, the cabin lights dimmed in preparation for landing. James silently fastened his seatbelt, but his mind was anything but calm. He knew one thing for certain. This flight hadn't just changed his itinerary, it had changed his life, and Sophia wouldn't be able to run from him again. Chapter 3. Facing the Truth. The sound of the plane's wheels touching the runway jolted James Carter back to reality. The pressure of the aircraft slowing down was nothing compared to the weight of the thoughts swirling in his mind. She had hidden his son from him for 5 years. As the seatbelt sign turned off, passengers stood up, gathering their belongings. But James remained still. His eyes were locked on Sophia, who was desperately avoiding his gaze, clutching Leo tightly as if afraid he would take the boy from her at any moment. She wasn't going to run again. As the line of passengers began moving toward the exit, Sophia hurriedly pulled Leo up, walking briskly. But James had anticipated this. He stood, taking a long step forward, blocking her path. Sophia flinched, gripping her son's hand even tighter. "Did you really think you could just walk away without explaining?" James asked, his voice low but sharp. Sophia didn't answer, but her wary eyes spoke volumes. "Mommy." Leo tugged at her sleeve, but Sophia quickly soothed him, forcing herself to stay calm. James lowered his voice, his tone carrying an unmistakable warning. "We're going to talk, and this time, you don't have a choice." Silence stretched between them. A silent battle played out in their locked gazes. Sophia knew James wasn't a man who gave up easily. At last, she sighed in resignation. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Hudson Brew on Lexington Street," she said quietly before hurrying away with Leo. James watched them go, his hand unconsciously clenching into a fist. She wouldn't escape him again. Hudson Brew was a cozy cafe on the corner of Lexington Street, with exposed brick walls and the rich aroma of roasted coffee filling the air. James arrived early, sitting in a secluded corner with an espresso in front of him. He wasn't the kind of man who frequented small coffee shops like this, but today he wasn't here to relax. At exactly 10 a.m., Sophia walked in, Leo in tow. Leo looked excited, but Sophia was visibly tense. She glanced around briefly before approaching James's table. "Sit," James said, making no effort to hide his irritation. Sophia pulled out a chair, settling Leo first before facing James. "What do you want to say?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. James rested both hands on the table, leaning forward, his gaze cold and piercing. "Why?" His question was simple, but it carried immense weight. Sophia knew she couldn't avoid the truth any longer. She took a deep breath, clenching her hands in her lap before finally speaking. "Do you remember the last time we saw each other?" Sophia asked, her voice quiet but sharp as a blade. James remained silent. Of course he remembered. 5 years ago, Sophia had walked out of his life without a word. "At that time, I loved you," she said bluntly, "but I was also an investigative journalist. My job was to expose those who abused power, those involved in dirty financial dealings, those who manipulated markets with shady tactics." She met his eyes head on. "And you were one of them." James' expression didn't change, but a slow-burning anger ignited within him. "I never did anything illegal," he said, his voice measured. "Maybe not," Sophia scoffed, "but you stood among those who did. I was investigating a market manipulation case, and the name I found tied to it was Carter Holdings." James felt his anger surge. "So you didn't trust me?" he demanded, his voice edged with frustration. Sophia let out a bitter laugh. "How could I? When I found those documents, when I started asking questions, you didn't explain. You pushed me away." James clenched his fists. She was right. Back then, when she confronted him about his business dealings, he had refused to explain. He hadn't wanted her involved in his affairs. He hadn't wanted anyone questioning how he ran Carter Holdings. And so, he had let her go. James stared at Sophia, her words ringing in his head like a deafening alarm. She had said she couldn't accept who he was, that she left because of the financial scandal. But what tormented him most wasn't her accusations. It was the memory of the days when they had once been happy together. 5 years ago, London autumn. James hadn't met Sophia at a lavish party or through powerful connections. He had met her in an interview. Back then, Sophia was a young, fearless, and intelligent journalist. She had come to Carter Holdings to write an article about the company's financial strategies. James remembered that day vividly. She had walked into the conference room wearing a simple white blouse, her dark brown hair falling in soft waves, a few strands resting on her forehead. Her gaze was determined, but not arrogant. Unlike other journalists, Sophia didn't flatter him, didn't try to win his favor. She looked him straight in the eye and asked sharp, precise questions that caught him off guard. "Mr. Carter, people say you never let emotions interfere with your business decisions. Has there ever been anything that made you waver?" James didn't answer immediately, because for the first time, he felt like someone saw through him. After that interview, Sophia never left his thoughts. She was different from anyone in his world, a world of calculations, where everything had a price and every relationship was a transaction. Sophia didn't want anything from him. She just wanted to understand him, and that was what drew James to her. He started seeking her out, at first under the pretense of casual coffee meetings, then leisurely walks around London as she introduced him to places he had never paid attention to. A small bookstore on a street corner, a shop selling old paintings, a cozy pub that wasn't extravagant, but felt like home. For the first time in his life, he felt like a person, not just a money-making machine. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to love. James closed his eyes, struggling to control his emotions. He had loved Sophia in a way he had never loved anyone else. And then she left. And now she had returned with a child who had his eyes telling him she didn't want him involved in their son's life. The feeling of betrayal, of being robbed of something precious, was like discovering that everything he had believed in had been nothing but an illusion. James opened his eyes, his gaze icy as it locked onto Sophia. "Did you ever love me, Sophia? Or was it all just my own foolish illusion?" Sophia froze, her eyes flickering with emotion. And for the first time, she couldn't answer right away. Her voice trembled slightly as she continued. "When I left you, I didn't know I was pregnant." Those words hit James like a punch to the gut. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm. "Then why didn't you come back?" "Because I knew that if you found out, you would want to intervene." She met his gaze head on. "You're not the kind of man who gives up control easily. I didn't want my son to grow up in a world ruled by money and power." James didn't immediately argue, because in some ways Sophia wasn't wrong. His entire life had revolved around work. He had never considered having children, never thought of himself as a father, but that didn't give her the right to take that away from him. James's reaction. James inhaled deeply, leaning back in his chair, his expression dark. "You stole 5 years of my son's life from me," he said, his voice low but commanding. Sophia pressed her lips together but didn't deny it. "I missed my son's first years. I wasn't there to hear him call me dad for the first time. I wasn't there when he took his first steps, when he got sick, when he spoke his first word." James's anger was no longer the cold, calculated kind. It was pain. Sophia bit her lip, looking away. She knew there was no justification for what she had done. James leaned forward, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Whether you like it or not, I will do whatever it takes to be a part of my son's life." Sophia looked at him, hesitation and fear flickering in her eyes. But James knew she also understood. Chapter 4. Learning to be a Father. James Carter was not a man who changed easily. For nearly 40 years, his life had revolved around Carter Holdings, billion-dollar deals, and high-stakes negotiations with the world's biggest corporations. But now he had a new reason to change. His son. After his tense conversation with Sophia, James wasted no time in keeping his promise. He cut back on meetings, delegated more responsibilities to his executive team, and, for the first time ever, turned down a major business deal just to make time for Leo. His shift in priorities shocked the New York financial world, but James didn't care. He couldn't change the past. He couldn't reclaim the 5 years he had lost. But from now on, he wouldn't miss another second. A week after their cafe meeting, James took Leo to the park for the first time. Sophia was still hesitant, but seeing how excited Leo was, she reluctantly agreed. Central Park was bustling with people strolling along the paths, children running across the green lawns, and laughter filling the crisp air. Leo was thrilled. He grabbed James's hand tightly, pulling him toward the children's play area, where there was a mini racetrack for toy cars. Dad, look, there's a little car. I want to drive it." James froze for a second at the word dad. It was the first time Leo had called him that. A warmth spread through his chest, an unfamiliar but deeply fulfilling sensation. He knelt down and nodded. "Then let's drive." Leo climbed into a small red electric car, his tiny hands gripping the steering wheel. But within seconds, he struggled to maneuver it, looking up at James with hopeful eyes. "Can you help me, Dad?" James had never taught anyone how to drive before, but seeing the anticipation in his son's eyes, he couldn't refuse. He stepped forward, placing his hands over Leo's, gently guiding him on how to turn the wheel and control the speed. Leo burst into laughter as the car finally moved in the right direction. After a while, he was driving on his own, circling the racetrack with a beaming smile. James stood back, watching, a rare, genuine smile forming on his lips. For the first time in his life, he realized there were things far more valuable than money and power. A few weeks later, James faced his first real challenge. Sophia had to leave for an urgent business trip and couldn't stay home. James volunteered to watch Leo overnight, despite Sophia's reluctance. "Are you sure you can handle it?" she asked, skepticism clear in her voice. James raised an eyebrow. "You think I can run a global financial empire but not take care of a child?" Sophia crossed her arms, pressing her lips together. "Taking care of a child is nothing like running a company. James smirked. Let me try. Sophia sighed, finally relenting. But he had been too confident. The evening went smoothly. Leo ate dinner, James helped him brush his teeth, and even read him a bedtime story. But then, in the middle of the night, Leo developed a high fever. James panicked. He had no idea what to do. For the first time in his life, he felt helpless. He tried calling Sophia, but her phone was unreachable. With no other option, he had to figure it out himself. He placed a warm compress on Leo's forehead, made him some orange juice, and even held him close, gently patting his back. You'll be okay, Leo, he murmured, his voice softer than ever. Leo curled into his chest, his tired eyes slowly closing. James stayed by his bedside all night, not sleeping for even a minute. By morning, Leo's fever had gone down. Sophia stood silently in her small apartment, staring at the scene before her. James Carter, the cold-hearted CEO who had always put work above everything else, now sitting by their son's bed, asleep from exhaustion. His large hand clasped Leo's tiny fingers, as if letting go would make the boy disappear. She swallowed hard. Memories from 5 years ago crashed over her like a tidal wave. 5 years ago, the day Sophia left. She had never imagined she would become a single mother. When she found out she was pregnant, she had considered many options. But in the end, she couldn't bear to give up the baby. Even though her heart was shattered, even though she hated James for what he had done, she still loved the child growing inside her. She left London alone, moved to New York, and started over. Life had never been easy. There were nights she sat in a cramped apartment, holding her pregnant belly, crying. There were days she barely had enough money for a proper meal, but she still saved every penny to buy milk for her son. There were times when Leo fell sick, crying through the night. She had cradled him in her arms, soothing him, but her own tears had fallen onto his tiny face. She had thought about calling James. There were moments when she held the phone in her trembling hands, her finger hovering over the call button. But she always put it down. She was afraid. Afraid that if he knew about Leo, he would fight for custody. Afraid that he would raise Leo as the heir to Carter Holdings, rather than as a child who deserved a normal life. And most of all, she was afraid she still loved him. She couldn't go back. She had chosen this life, a life without James Carter. But now the man she had tried so hard to forget, the man she thought would never be a part of her son's life, was sitting right in front of her. He was no longer the emotionless CEO she once knew. James had stayed up all night watching over their son, had tried to learn how to be a father, had put aside his work to be there for Leo. She didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. That evening, Leo was feeling better. He clung to James, refusing to sleep without him. "Dad, can you read me a story?" Leo mumbled sleepily, his voice filled with hope. James had never read a children's book before, but when he saw the eager look on his son's face, he couldn't say no. He picked up The Adventures of the Little Blue Dragon and began reading, his voice slightly stiff, lacking the warmth and expression that came naturally to Sophia. But Leo didn't care. The boy giggled, his eyes lighting up as he listened to the tale of a dragon soaring over mountains, battling monsters, and finding treasure. "You're really good at this, Dad," Leo whispered when the story ended. James wasn't sure if that was true, but when Leo nuzzled into his arm, his eyelids fluttering shut, he knew he had done something right. When James stepped out of the room, Sophia was waiting for him. She crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "You're changing," she said softly. James shrugged. "I think you were right." She was silent for a moment before letting out a quiet sigh. "Maybe. I was wrong to think you couldn't be a father." James met her gaze, a flicker of hope stirring in his chest. He didn't expect Sophia to forgive him immediately, but at least for now, she acknowledged that he was trying. And that was a start. Chapter 5. Buried Feelings. Sophia could no longer deny it. James was changing. He was no longer the cold, power-driven man she once thought he was. Slowly, she began to notice his efforts, small actions that carried immense meaning. He wasn't just showing up in Leo's life as a visitor. He was truly becoming a father. He listened when Leo talked about his dreams. He patiently taught his son how to assemble model airplanes. He paid attention to the little things, what Leo liked to eat, what scared him, which side he slept on. and that terrified Sophia. She was afraid she was letting her guard down, afraid that her heart was beginning to soften again. That evening, Sophia was working late in her room, focused on important documents for an investigative report she was writing. In the living room, she knew James was still there with Leo. Ever since he started spending time with their son, James had been staying longer, especially on the days when she was busy. She had grown used to the sound of Leo's laughter filling the apartment, the toy cars rolling across the floor, and even James's deep voice reading bedtime stories. But tonight, something was different. "Dad!" Sophia froze. Her heart skipped a beat. She dropped her pen and rushed into the living room, and the sight before her made her throat tighten. Leo was hugging James tightly, his small face resting against his father's chest, a radiant smile lighting up his features. James remained frozen for a few seconds, as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. But then slowly, he wrapped his arms around Leo, a rare warmth shining in his eyes. Sophia stood in the doorway, overwhelmed by a flood of emotions. She had never imagined she would witness this moment, seeing Leo accept James so naturally. And the scariest part was, she was starting to accept it too. That night, a heavy rainstorm hit the city. Sophia and Leo had just returned from a shopping trip at the mall, and James had driven them home. Raindrops pelted against the car windows, the wind howling outside. James slowed the car as they approached her apartment building, his eyes scanning the waterlogged streets. "I should walk you two inside," he said, his voice laced with concern. Sophia hesitated for a moment, but as she watched the rain grow heavier, she nodded. "All right." The three of them hurried into the building, trying to avoid getting drenched. Standing in front of her apartment, Sophia unlocked the door, then turned to look at James. Outside, the rain poured relentlessly, droplets sliding down his hair and coat. He could leave now. He could say goodbye and walk away like he always did. But for some reason this time, Sophia spoke first. "Do you want to come in?" James raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the invitation. Sophia quickly looked away, as if she herself couldn't believe she had just said that. "I mean, it's raining too hard. You can wait it out for a bit." She avoided his gaze. James stared at her for a few seconds. Then a small smile appeared on his lips. "All right." Sophia's apartment wasn't luxurious, but it was warm, a kind of warmth James had never felt in any of his high-end residences. After hanging up his damp coat, he sat at the dining table while Sophia prepared a simple dinner, pasta with tomato sauce and meatballs. Leo was ecstatic. As he played with his toy cars on the table, he chattered away at James. "Dad, what's your favorite food?" James was caught off guard by the question. He had never really thought about it. "He likes expensive steak," Sophia teased, unable to suppress a small smile. James smirked. "Maybe, but tonight, I think I like this more." Sophia paused, her eyes locking onto his. James wasn't just talking about the meal. He was talking about this moment. Dinner was more comfortable than Sophia had expected. She wasn't as guarded as she usually was. Leo kept talking excitedly, and James, he listened. He joined in. He became a part of the family. After the meal, Leo clung to James, reluctant to let him go. "Dad, can you stay over?" Sophia stiffened. She turned to James, waiting for his response. He could refuse. He could say he was busy. But instead, James knelt down, gently ruffling Leo's hair. "I can't tonight, but I promise I'll be back tomorrow." Leo looked a little disappointed, but eventually nodded. Sophia stood by the door, her emotions in turmoil. She never thought there would come a day when James could be patient enough, caring enough to truly become a father. And what scared her the most, she was starting to believe he actually could. Chapter 6. Secrets from the Past. Sophia froze in front of her apartment's mailbox. In her hands was a black envelope with no return address, only a single crudely scrawled message on the front. "Stop investigating or you'll lose everything." She felt the blood in her veins turn to ice. She didn't need to open it to know this wasn't a joke. Her grip tightened around the envelope, her heart pounding against her ribs. This was supposed to be over. 5 years ago, when Sophia was still an investigative journalist in London, she had pursued a financial scandal that shook the industry. A shadowy organization was behind a series of market manipulations, money laundering operations, and high-level bribery schemes. Just as she was about to expose the truth, an unseen force stopped her. She received threats, was followed, and ultimately, she was forced to disappear, leaving London to protect the child growing inside her. She had thought that after all these years it had been buried and forgotten. But now, they were back. And this time they weren't just after her. They were after James, too. Sophia quickly glanced around, scanning the streets for any sign of someone watching her. But everything appeared normal. Pedestrians walking by, cars parked along the curb, nothing obviously suspicious. Yet she could feel it. That unsettling sensation of being watched from the shadows, as if unseen eyes were tracking her every move. Swallowing hard, she shoved the letter into her bag and hurried up to her apartment. James noticed the unease in Sophia the moment she stepped through the door. Leo was busy playing in his room, leaving just the two of them in the living room. "What's wrong?" James asked immediately. Sophia hesitated for a moment before pulling out the letter and placing it on the table. James frowned, picking it up. His expression darkened as he read the message. "What the hell is this?" His voice dropped into a dangerously low tone. Sophia bit her lip before telling him everything. The scandal she had investigated 5 years ago, the people behind it, and the real reason she had been forced to leave. James's jaw tightened. "So you didn't just leave me because you didn't trust me? You left because you knew that if you stayed, you'd be putting both of us in danger?" Sophia didn't answer immediately, but her silence was enough. James stood pacing the room, his hands clenched into fists. Then he turned back to her, his eyes dark and intense. "They've found you," he said grimly, "and now they know about me." Sophia nodded slightly, the fear creeping back into her chest. James stepped closer, gripping her shoulders firmly. "Do you think I'm going to let them touch you or my son?" His voice was filled with authority, but also with something else, an unwavering determination. Sophia stared at him, her heart racing. She knew James wasn't someone who could be easily threatened. She knew that if he had decided to protect them, he would do it at any cost. But that also meant he was in danger now. "You can't do this, James. If they find out you're getting involved, they will—" He cut her off. "I don't care." His gaze locked onto hers, his voice deep and resolute. "I lost 5 years of my son's life without knowing he even existed. I will not stand by and let anyone take my family from me again." Sophia inhaled sharply, a strange warmth spreading through her chest. For years, she had believed James only cared about his work, his reputation, and his wealth. But the man standing before her now was different. He was willing to risk everything to protect her and Leo, regardless of what it might cost him. James didn't wait for her to argue. He immediately pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Sophia recognized the name he spoke. Marcus, his private security advisor. "Marcus, I need you to investigate something," James commanded, his voice full of authority. As he ended the call, his eyes met Sophia's, a silent promise that things would not be the same as before. Sophia knew there was no stopping him. All she could do was stand there, watching the man she had once loved now standing before her like an unbreakable shield. She didn't know where this battle would lead them, but there was one thing she knew for certain. James Carter would not back down. Chapter 7. Confronting the Enemy. The moment James received the threat letter, he didn't hesitate for even a second. He immediately called Marcus, his most trusted security advisor. "I need a safe place for Sophia and Leo, right now." Within an hour, Marcus had everything arranged. James took Sophia and Leo to a secure apartment, an upscale building in Manhattan, heavily guarded and owned by Carter Holdings. When they arrived, Sophia stood in the spacious apartment, gazing out at the city skyline through the large windows, doubt flickering in her eyes. "You think hiding here will make everything go away?" She turned to him. James remained calm. But at least it keeps you and Leo safe while I handle this." Sophia bit her lip, unease settling deep within her. But as she met James' unwavering gaze, she knew he wasn't going to back down. Within 24 hours, Marcus had uncovered the man behind the threat. His name was Victor Langley, a businessman with a polished exterior, but in reality, a financial manipulator and money-laundering kingpin. 5 years ago, he had orchestrated the very scandal Sophia had been investigating. And more importantly, he had once tried to pull James into his operation. Now seeing Sophia reappear at James's side, Victor knew the past was resurfacing, and he would do whatever it took to silence them, permanently. James refused to sit idly by. He went to confront Victor directly, in a tense face-off at the headquarters of Langley Group, the legitimate front for Victor's criminal empire. Walking into the luxurious conference room, James exuded complete confidence. Victor rose from his seat, a fake smile on his lips. "James Carter, it's been a long time." James smirked. "Cut the small talk, Victor. I'm not here for pleasantries." Victor chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "I'm guessing this is about your little reporter?" James' gaze darkened. "We know you were behind that scandal." Victor didn't deny it. He simply raised an eyebrow, as if contemplating something. Then he sighed, shaking his head. "You're smart, James, but you know how the game works. Being the smartest doesn't always mean you win." He pulled out an envelope from his desk and tossed it onto the table. James didn't need to open it to know what it contained. Evidence of Victor's corrupt dealings, the underground network he used to manipulate the financial world. "You want to play hero?" Victor's voice dropped an octave. "Fine, but remember, I'm not alone. Are you really willing to risk everything for a woman and a child?" James didn't hesitate for a second. His voice was calm but unwavering as he stated, "I won't let you touch them." Then without another word, he turned and walked out, leaving Victor smirking behind him. James knew this battle was far from over, but no matter what it took, he would protect Sophia and Leo. When James returned to the safe house, Sophia was waiting. She had spent the day digging deeper into Victor Langley, and what she found left her stunned. Slowly, she sat down, looking at James in disbelief. You were never involved in the scandal." James nodded. "Number Victor tried to use me. When I realized what was happening, I pulled away. But you left before I ever had the chance to explain." Sophia felt her chest tighten. 5 years ago, she had believed James was part of that corrupt world. Now she realized she had been wrong. She had abandoned him when he needed her most. Tears welled in her eyes as she bit her lip. "Why didn't you come after me?" she whispered. James let out a quiet, bitter laugh. "You disappeared without a trace, but even if I had found you, would you have believed me?" Sophia was silent. She didn't know how to answer that. The room was filled with a long, heavy silence. Then slowly she reached out and took James's hand. "I'm sorry." 3 simple words, yet they carried the weight of everything left unspoken. James looked at her, his gaze softening. He didn't say anything. He simply squeezed her hand, a silent acknowledgement that he accepted her apology. She couldn't change the past, but she could give him a chance to make up for the future. And this time, Chapter 8, A Real Family. As time passed, things gradually settled. The scandal from years ago was finally brought to light. Victor Langley was investigated and prosecuted, and the threats against Sophia and Leo came to an end. After months of fear and uncertainty, Sophia could finally breathe a sigh of relief, but there was something she hadn't expected. She had started to feel safer with James around, and more importantly, she knew that Leo needed his father, so she made a decision to move closer to James. Not because she was forced to, not because James demanded it, but because she truly wanted to. Her new apartment was in a quiet neighborhood, just a few streets away from James's penthouse. It wasn't as luxurious as the places James was used to, but there was a warmth to it, one that he had come to appreciate. James never pressured her to move in with him, but ever since Sophia and Leo had settled nearby, he found more reasons to be around. He took Leo to school, then stopped by for dinner with them. He read bedtime stories and sometimes even fell asleep on the couch while watching cartoons with Leo. Little by little, his presence became a natural part of their lives, as if this was the way it was always meant to be. One late afternoon, Sophia stood in the kitchen, making tea while listening to the laughter echoing from the living room. James was helping Leo assemble a model airplane, patiently guiding him step by step. "No, Leo, the propeller has to go here, or the plane won't fly." "But I like it here." "Well then, it'll be a very unique airplane." James chuckled. Sophia smiled softly, warmth spreading through her chest. Piece by piece, James had changed. He was no longer the cold, business-driven man she once knew. Now he was a father, a man who listened, who cared, who put others before his career. She had never imagined seeing this side of him, but now she witnessed it every day. After dinner, Leo climbed onto the couch, stretching his arms with a satisfied sigh. He turned to look at Sophia and James, his bright blue eyes filled with innocence. "Mom, we're a family now, right?" Sophia froze. She didn't know how to answer. She and James hadn't officially gotten back together. They had never talked about their feelings after everything that had happened. But looking at Leo, sitting between them, his face glowing with happiness, Sophia realized he already had his own answer. She smiled, her voice gentle. "Yes, sweetheart, we are a family." Leo beamed, then let out a yawn, curling up against Sophia. James said nothing, but slowly his hand reached out, gently clasping hers. Sophia tensed for a moment, but she didn't pull away. His hand was warm and steady, just as it had always been, like a quiet reassurance. There was no need to rush, no need for grand promises, just the knowledge that they were walking this new path together. That night, when Leo was fast asleep, James stood up to leave. Sophia walked him to the door, the two of them standing in comfortable silence. "I'll pick up Leo in the morning," James said, his voice low and warm. Sophia nodded. "Yeah, don't forget his lunchbox." James smirked. "Already packed." A brief pause. Neither of them said "I love you." Neither of them brought up the painful past. But in their eyes there was an unspoken understanding. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. A journey they would discover together. Sophia opened the door, letting James step outside. He walked a few steps, then stopped. Turning back, a soft smile played on his lips. "Good night, Sophia." She smiled, her heart steady and warm. "Good night, James." And as the door closed, it wasn't to separate them. It was to open up a new future, one for a real family. Chapter 9. 1 year later. The proposal and the wedding. 1 year later. The sun cast a soft golden glow over New York City as the evening settled in. From the high floor of an elegant restaurant, Sophia gazed down at the bustling streets below. The twinkling streetlights reflected against the glass windows, creating an atmosphere both warm and magical. She gently swirled the wine in her glass, trying to conceal her nervousness. James had invited her here tonight, but unlike their usual outings, he hadn't told her why. And that made her a little anxious. A lot had changed in the past year. She was no longer the single mother raising her child alone, nor did she hesitate when it came to James's presence in her and Leo's life anymore. After everything, he had proven that he truly wanted to be a part of this family. James wasn't just a good father. He was persistent. He had spent the past year showing her that he had changed, that he was no longer the cold, work-obsessed man he once was. He could spend an entire afternoon building a model airplane with Leo. He could skip an important meeting just to take her to the doctor when she wasn't feeling well. He could stay up all night when Leo had a fever and still show up the next morning in a perfectly pressed suit without a single complaint. All of it made her believe that he was here to stay. When the restaurant doors opened, James walked in. Still the same tall, commanding figure in an expensive suit, but the way he looked at her now carried a warmth that hadn't been there before. Sophia smiled. "You're late." He shrugged, pulling out a chair and sitting across from her. "Had some things to prepare." She raised an eyebrow. "Prepare what?" James didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Sophia felt her heart stop for a moment. The box? It couldn't be. James flipped open the lid, revealing a stunning diamond ring. The candlelight flickered against the gemstone, but the way James looked at her was even brighter. Then he stood up and lowered himself onto one knee. Around them, a few guests in the restaurant started to take notice. A couple of servers stood at a distance, trying to hide their excited smiles. Sophia covered her mouth, her heart pounding wildly. "I know," James began, his deep voice steady, "that I've made mistakes, and I know I lost you once, and maybe you still haven't completely forgiven me." Her throat tightened. "But in this past year, I've realized that my life has no meaning without you and Leo." His gaze locked onto hers, unwavering. "I love you, Sophia, and I want us to officially be a family." He took a deep breath before letting out a small, hopeful smile. "Will you marry me?" The air around them stilled. Sophia had no words. Part of her wanted to cry. Another part of her wanted to laugh at how overwhelming this happiness felt. But above all, she knew this was what she had always wanted. Finally, she swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded. "Yes," she whispered, "I'll marry you." James smiled. One of those rare, genuine smiles she had only seen a few times in all the years she had known him. Gently, he slid the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms. Applause erupted from the surrounding guests. But for Sophia, the only thing she could hear was the steady, strong rhythm of his heartbeat, warm and unwavering. 3 months later, a simple yet elegant wedding took place. Sophia didn't want anything too extravagant, and James fully respected that. The ceremony was held in the garden of a luxurious seaside hotel, where the golden sunset bathed the white chairs in its soft glow. Leo was the ring bearer, dressed in a tiny suit, running around excitedly. When Sophia stepped out, her gown hugging her waist gracefully, her soft curls cascading over her shoulders, James felt his heart stop all over again. She was beautiful. But more than that, she had truly accepted him. The ceremony was intimate, surrounded by close friends and family. As they exchanged vows, Leo, too excited to contain himself, shouted out loud, "Mom, we're really a family now, right?" Laughter filled the air, and Sophia, with tears brimming in her eyes, nodded. James bent down, lifting their son into his arms. "Yes, and we always will be." The crowd erupted in applause as they sealed their vows with a kiss, and in that moment, everything finally felt complete. Not a perfect fairy tale ending, but a new beginning, one filled with love, hope, and the family they had fought so hard to build. Thank you for following this heartfelt story of Soul Stories channel. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. If you believe that true love can withstand all trials and sometimes begins in the simplest of ways, don't forget to hit the like button and share this story with your friends. To never miss out on touching and meaningful stories, subscribe to our channel and help us spread messages of love and warmth to everyone. Let's cherish